She crashed the CEO's Halloween party by mistake, but what he did left her embarrassed and in love. She wasn't invited, she wasn't dressed for it, she wasn't even supposed to be in that part of town. But somehow, there she was, standing in the middle of a masked ballroom, holding her breath while strangers whispered and stared. One mistake got her in. What happened next? That you're not ready for. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. That woman doesn't even have a mask, someone whispered behind her, loudly enough to sting. Or an invitation, added another, with a laugh so sharp it could have cut silk. Elena Ward stood frozen beneath the chandeliers, her hands gently clasped in front of her, as if they could shield her from the storm of eyes now turning toward her. The ballroom shimmered in gold and black, flickering candles casting shadows across a sea of masked faces. All of them elegant, all of them invited, except her. She shouldn't have been there. The invitation, a black envelope tucked into her borrowed coat, had been meant for someone else. A woman named Eleanor Ward, a high-profile event planner. Her name had been mixed up with Elena's on a company delivery. A coincidence so small. And yet now it was everything. At events like this, security checked envelopes and time slots, not IDs, a private party's version of trust. The moment she'd stepped past the doorman, she knew it felt too grand. But she thought maybe it was just the way rich people did Halloween. Masks, mystery, opulence, a private event in a mansion she never dreamed she'd enter. She hadn't even planned to leave her apartment that night. Now, standing under a vaulted ceiling painted like a midnight sky, Elena looked heartbreakingly out of place in her deep blue silk dress, simple, elegant, utterly unprepared. Her moon-shaped earring caught the candlelight, trembling slightly with each breath she took. And then, silence, a pause in the music, a ripple in the room. From the far end of the ballroom, a tall man stepped forward. He wore a black velvet half-mask, tailored suit, and a single red rose pinned to his lapel. The air shifted. Even the murmurs died. All eyes turned to him as though he controlled the very rhythm of the evening. He didn't speak right away, just studied her. His pale gray eyes, sharp as frost, locked on hers, not cruel, not amused, just curious, quietly intense. Elena felt heat crawl up her neck. "I didn't mean to," she started, voice soft but clear. "There's been a mistake." The masked man tilted his head. "Apparently," he said, his voice deep and measured. "You walked into my home, my event, without a mask or a name on the list." It was true, and yet the way he said it didn't sound accusing. More like puzzled, even intrigued. I'll leave," Elena offered, stepping back. Her heel caught on the edge of a rug, and she wobbled, just slightly, enough to make a few guests chuckle behind their masks. The man moved forward instantly, reaching out before she could fall. One strong hand steadied her arm, warm through the silk of her dress. "Not yet," he said, then added, almost as an afterthought, "It would be bad luck to turn away the moon on Halloween." She blinked up at him, stunned. What did that mean? But he was already turning, addressing the room. "She stays." The crowd shifted uneasily. Murmurs rose again, but no one dared contradict him. Not here, not tonight, not Damien Cross. Yes, that was who he was. She knew the name now, the reclusive billionaire CEO whose company handled global luxury estates. His name had been whispered across boardrooms like a ghost story. Brilliant. Cold, untouchable, and now offering her his arm. "Miss Ward," he said quietly, "since you're here, would you care to dance?" She hesitated. Then, perhaps out of shock or pride or some flicker of daring she didn't know she had, she slipped her hand through his. They moved to the center of the floor as the string quartet resumed. He was a graceful dancer, guiding her with ease, though his expression remained unreadable. Elena tried not to look at the people watching, judging. A few guests, the ones who mattered most, had chosen to forego masks entirely. It was a silent privilege, reserved for those whose names carried more weight than the invitation itself. But one face stood out, a striking woman in silver, maskless, sipping champagne with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She's not happy," Elena murmured, glancing toward the woman. Damien's grip tightened slightly on her hand. "She rarely is. Is she your—" "She's not." The reply came fast, too fast. Elena looked up, startled. For a moment his jaw tensed, and something flickered behind his mask, something careful, guarded. Then it was gone. They danced a full song in silence, save for the soft brush of her dress and the music in the air. When it ended, he leaned close and murmured, "Come, you need a drink." They walked, together, past the curious eyes and the silver woman's icy stare. He handed her a small glass of something amber-colored, warm, not sharp, spiced. "Apple cider," he said, "the only drink I tolerate on this ridiculous night." Elena smiled, grateful for the pause, for the warmth in her hands. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting them laugh me out." "They still did," he replied. "But they'll forget. I've seen worse. Much worse." He paused, then added more gently, "Besides, you're not like them." A beat, a breath, a heartbeat. Elena's cheeks flushed. "I really should go before I embarrass myself more," she whispered, though she didn't step away. Damien studied her a long moment. "Why were you alone tonight, Miss Ward?" She blinked. I just didn't feel like being around people." "Then perhaps," he said slowly, "you walked into exactly the right mistake." They stood there, two strangers on opposite sides of a world neither fully understood, yet for one breathless moment. Perfectly aligned, and then crash. A tray clattered to the floor behind them, glass everywhere. A waiter stumbled back, pale-faced, and right beside him. Someone's phone, lit up and buzzing with a new message. It was a photo, one Vivian had quietly leaked to a gossip columnist minutes earlier, now spreading like wildfire across the guests' screens. CEO's Halloween date exposed. Party crasher or secret fling. A ripple of gasps followed. Cameras clicked, murmurs flared like fire. Elena's hand froze on the cider glass, her chest tightening. Damien's expression didn't shift, but his eyes, something had changed. He slowly lowered his hand from hers. And just like that, the warmth was gone. In the flicker of a second, she wasn't part of the story anymore. She was the headline. And every eye was back on her. The whispers hit her harder than the flash from the cameras. She lied. Typical social climber? Probably planned it. No one wears a dress like that by accident. Elena couldn't move. Her throat was tight, her cheeks burned, and for a moment she didn't even recognize the glass in her hand. Her fingers had curled so tightly around it, the cider had gone cold. She turned slightly, just enough to see Damien's profile, unreadable, distant now, as if someone had pulled a curtain between them. He didn't say a word, not to her, not to them, not to anyone. The same man who had defended her a minute ago now looked like he wasn't sure if he even knew her. The crowd had moved closer, the murmurs thick as smoke. Elena could hear the silver woman laughing, soft and cruel, her voice like a piano played with cold fingers. "She's very pretty," the woman said, sipping her champagne, in a tragic deer-in-headlights sort of way. Elena turned her face away. "I should go," she whispered, barely audible. No one stopped her this time, not even him. She slipped between costume guests, who parted with theatrical sympathy, as if she were already a fading myth. Her heels tapped softly over the marble floor, her heart hammering harder than her steps. Outside the ballroom, the corridor was dim and quiet. Heavy doors muffled the music behind her. She walked blindly down the hall, past portraits she couldn't see, past gilded mirrors that didn't feel like they were hers to look into. Finally, she found a small side room, empty, dark, but warm. She stepped inside, shut the door, and let her back press against the smooth wood. Her hand flew to her ear. The silver moon earring was still there, the tiniest thing, but now it felt heavier somehow, as if it carried the weight of everything she hadn't said. She swallowed hard. Why hadn't he said something? Anything. She hadn't meant to crash a party. She hadn't even wanted to leave the apartment tonight. And now her face was probably already circling on social media. A joke, a headline, another nobody pretending to belong. A soft knock startled her. She stiffened, wiped under her eyes, straightened her spine. "Who is it?" she asked, voice low. No answer. The door creaked open, but it wasn't Damien. It was someone much shorter, older, holding a small tray. "I'm sorry," the woman said gently. "They told me someone might need this more than champagne." It was a simple plate. Warm bread rolls, a tiny bowl of pumpkin soup, and a folded linen napkin. "I used to be a caterer," the woman added, her accent soft and rural. "Still like to carry a tray now and then. Makes me feel invisible in a good way." Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just nodded. The woman placed the tray on a side table and gave a small smile before retreating without another word. The soup smelled like cinnamon and cloves, and for the first time since entering the mansion, Elena exhaled. She sat down, slowly letting the silence settle around her. The soup warmed her hands, her throat, her chest. She hadn't realized how much she needed it, not just the food, but the gesture. That tiny moment of care, that pause in the chaos, a micro-victory, quiet, nourishing. But peace never stayed long, because the door opened again, and this time it was him. He stepped inside, closed the door, and looked at her with the same unreadable expression from before, still masked, still elegant, but less certain now. "I shouldn't have let that happen," Damien said, his voice softer than she expected. She stared at him. "But you did." He didn't argue. "I didn't invite you here," he added. Elena's eyes flashed. "You did. When you asked me to dance, when you gave me cider, when you made them stop laughing." A pause. Then, "But you didn't defend me when it mattered." He walked toward the tray, picked up a napkin, sat down opposite her. The silence stretched. Finally he said, "I didn't know what was true." That hurt more than she thought it would. She blinked quickly, forcing herself not to look away. "You thought I planned this?" "That I... What? Crashed your party and staged a scandal for attention?" Damien didn't answer. Instead, his eyes dropped to her earring, that tiny silver moon. "You wore that when you walked in," he said quietly. "I remember. It caught the light." She touched it instinctively. He leaned back, voice lower now. "I don't let many people in, Miss Ward. I've learned not to." "That's not an excuse." "No," he said, "but it's the truth." They sat in silence again, facing each other with nothing but soup and stale shame between them. Then his hand reached slowly across the table, not to touch her, but to pick up one of the rolls. He tore it in half, handed her a piece without looking. Elena hesitated, then took it. Another silence. Softer this time, and just as she felt her breath start to settle, he spoke again. "There's something I think you should know," he said. Before she could ask what, a knock interrupted them, this one louder. More formal. Damien stood. He opened the door, and there she was. The silver woman, framed in the doorway like a painting meant to unsettle. "Oh," she said, cool and amused, "you found her." Then to Elena, eyes scanning her with pity sharpened into steel. "I believe you and I should have a chat." The woman stepped into the room like she belonged there more than the furniture did. Every part of her shimmered. Silver dress, silver clutch, silver tone. Even her smile was metallic. Elena straightened instinctively, smoothing the fabric of her dress. Her fingers brushed against the moon earring, as if to remind herself she still existed beneath all that scrutiny. Damien's voice was low. "Vivienne?" "Damien," she returned with the kind of familiarity that dared anyone else in the room to forget who she was. Then her gaze turned to Elena, and the smile stayed, but changed its shape. "You caused quite a stir tonight," Vivienne said lightly. "No one stopped talking about you since you walked in." Elena said nothing. "Let the silence do the talking." Vivienne took another step, tilting her head. "I have to admit, crashing a CEO's private gala, bold, even for a woman in blue." "I didn't crash it," Elena replied, calm but clear. "There was a mix-up with an invitation. I left the moment I realized." Vivienne mused. "Of course, accidents do happen, but I suppose not everyone gets rescued by the host." Damien's jaw tightened, barely noticeable, unless you were watching for it, which Elena was. Vivienne turned toward him with a knowing glance. "You do have a type, Damien. Quiet eyes, sad mouths, damsels in distress. The press is going to love this." "I'll handle the press," he said shortly. Vivienne lifted her hands in mock surrender, naturally. Then, returning her gaze to Elena, "Though I must say, that earring is lovely. Moon-shaped, isn't it? Rather poetic for someone who arrived unannounced." Elena blinked once. "It was my mother's." Vivienne paused, just enough to make it noticeable. "Ah," she said, as if that explained everything. Then added softly, "Well, be careful where it leads you. The moon can't survive in the sun for long." And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind her. Silence followed. Damien didn't move right away. His eyes were fixed on the doorway long after she was gone. "She's not always like that," he said eventually. "I believe you," Elena replied. "I think she's worse when she's being polite." Damien let out something between a sigh and a laugh. Elena stood, brushing imaginary dust off her skirt. "You should go after her. It's clear she belongs here. I don't." "I'm not sure I belong here either," he said. She stopped, turned to look at him. His mask was still on, but his voice wasn't. "I let this world shape me," he admitted, "and sometimes I forget it doesn't own me." Elena looked down at the half-eaten roll on the plate. Then back at him. Then maybe it's time to take something back. He looked at her, really looked, as if her words landed somewhere he didn't expect. She didn't wait for him to reply. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair, slipping it on slowly. When her fingers reached the collar, one of the coat buttons popped loose and rolled under the table with a soft click. She crouched to find it, hands brushing the edge of the rug, her breath catching. And there it was, the black invitation envelope. She hadn't even realized it was still in the pocket. Elena picked it up. It was addressed in elegant gold lettering, "Eleanor Ward." She held it for a moment, then turned it over, and wrote something on the back with a pen from her bag. A single line, quiet, firm. When she straightened, she handed it to Damien. "Keep this," she said, "in case you ever forget that not every mistake is a lie." He took it, not looking at what she wrote. Not yet. As she reached the door, he finally asked, "Where are you going?" Elena turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "I don't know," she said, "but somewhere I don't have to defend who I am before I've even said my name." She didn't wait for his reply. And for a man who spent years building walls, that door closing behind her echoed a little louder than expected. He looked down at the envelope in his hand, flipped it over. There, in delicate handwriting, were 6 words. "You saw me before they did." The party ended, but the noise didn't. By the time the last guest had been ushered out and the candles dimmed, the headlines were already alive, glowing on phone screens like tiny bonfires. "Mystery woman crashes Damien Cross's masquerade and dances her way into trouble." Accident or affair? Billionaire CEO spotted with unknown guest in intimate moment. The moonlit stranger, who is Elena Ward? Damien stood at the edge of the darkened ballroom, his mask held loosely in one hand. His jaw was tight, his eyes pale and tired. Behind him, staff collected champagne flutes with quiet efficiency. Someone turned off the music. The silence finally was complete. He hadn't realized how heavy the mask felt until it was gone. "Not bad press, all things considered," came Vivian's voice behind him. "They're saying you're charming again, mysterious, a bit reckless but still desirable." He didn't turn around. "I don't need a spin," he said flatly. "You always need a spin," she replied, stepping beside him. "It's not about the truth, Damien. It's about the version of you the world wants to buy." He looked at her, then. Maskless, yes, but more guarded than ever. "Did you send the first photo?" he asked. Vivian's smile was calm. "I sent it to someone who would have found it anyway. Better to control the story than let it control you." "You humiliated her." Vivian blinked. "She humiliated herself the moment she pretended to belong here." "She didn't pretend. She accepted your arm." Damien said nothing. "Damien." "He didn't have to." Vivian exhaled. "Look, let this go. It was one night. You don't even know her. I do know you, and I know what happens when you let someone crack the surface." She rested her hand lightly on his chest. "You break." He gently took her wrist and moved it away. "I've already broken," he said. "You just didn't notice." He walked away before she could reply. 3 days passed. Elena hadn't returned to her usual routes. She didn't answer unknown numbers. She hadn't updated her quiet design blog or posted a single thing online. Damien tried not to notice, and failed. He thought about the way she had looked at him in the quiet room, not like a man with power, but like someone who could choose something better and didn't. He asked his assistant to run a discreet search, nothing invasive, just enough to learn that she worked part-time at a local arts charity and occasionally volunteered at a small library on Tuesdays. It was Thursday. He went anyway. The library was small and smelled like paper and lemon polish. Warm light spilled through tall windows, touching every wooden surface like a blessing. A handwritten sign read, "Quiet, please. Kindness is contagious." He almost turned around. Then he saw her, tucked into a corner of the children's section, kneeling beside a little boy and helping him tie a shoelace. Her hair was in a simple braid down her back, and she wore a soft cardigan over a long dress. No silk, no glitter, just real, just Elena. He didn't approach immediately. He waited, quietly, watching as she returned a book to the shelf, laughed softly at something the child said, and stood up with the natural grace of someone who didn't know she was being watched. When she finally turned and saw him, her smile didn't come right away. She looked surprised, not angry, not flattered, just cautious. "Are you following me?" she asked gently, her voice a whisper to match the space. He stepped forward, slow. "No, I asked around. They said you might be here." She folded her arms loosely. Lips pressed together. "And why would you want to find me, Mr. Cross?" He didn't flinch at the formality. "Because I made a mistake, and you let me walk away with it." A pause. Elena glanced at the boy who had now moved to a nearby table, flipping through picture books. "Do you want something from me?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I brought something." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Not wrapped, simple, unpolished. She hesitated, then took it. Inside, nestled in soft gray velvet, was her silver moon earring, the one she hadn't even realized she'd lost. She looked up sharply. "You found it?" "It was caught in the back of the chair you sat in. I kept it until I could give it back in person." She ran her thumb over the crescent shape, her throat suddenly tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought it might matter." "It does." Another pause. The boy nearby sneezed loudly, startling them both, and breaking the moment. Elena smiled, just a little. Damien chuckled, barely but genuinely. The sound surprised her. You laugh, she said softly. He looked at her. I didn't, not really. Not until the moon crashed my party. Her breath caught. She wasn't ready to forgive him. But the wall she'd built was thinner than before. She turned the box over in her hand, her voice quieter now. Why did you really come? He looked down, then met her gaze again. Because you walked away without making a scene, without asking for anything, without needing me to fix what I helped break. And that impressed you? He shook his head. No, it reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. She studied him, the question right there, unspoken. Between them, but she didn't ask it, and he didn't answer it. Instead, she looked down at the earring in her palm and finally said, I have tea on the stove at home. I was going to make some before walking here. Damien tilted his head. Is that an invitation? She gave the faintest smile. It's not a gala, no masks, just tea. Her apartment was smaller than he expected, not because it was cramped, but because it was real, lived in, the kind of place with soft corners, chipped mugs, and framed photographs on the wall that weren't edited or posed. A cat stretched lazily on a windowsill. Plants leaned toward the light, and in the air, the smell of cinnamon, cardamom, and something faintly floral. Damien stood just inside the doorway, still in his long black coat, unsure what to do with his hands. You can sit, you know, Elena said softly, setting the kettle on the stove. You don't have to hover like you're casing the place. He glanced at her. I'm just not used to being in spaces like this. Small? No, honest. She smiled faintly, back turned, as she reached for two mismatched mugs, one with a chipped rim and a faded print that read, World's Okayest Adult. He couldn't help it. He smiled. What? That mug, he said. It's absurd. It's my favorite. He sat down at her tiny table, the wood scratched from years of keys and books and grocery lists. A jar of sugar sat in the middle beside a single sunflower in a glass bottle. Everything about this place whispered something he hadn't heard in years. Welcome, without condition. She poured the tea slowly, chamomile with a hint of rose. The scent calmed him in ways he didn't understand. I don't have apple cider, she said, sliding the mug toward him, but this won't poison you. He took a sip. I trust you, he said quietly. She looked up, surprised. Not because of the words, but because of how he said them. Simple, no defense, no mask. I never asked you to, she replied. I know. A long silence passed, not heavy, just thoughtful. You said something at the library, she said, about remembering something you'd forgotten. He looked down at the tea in his hands, swirled it slowly. I grew up with nothing, he said finally. I built everything I have from walls, legal ones, financial ones, emotional ones, and eventually I became very good at keeping people where I wanted them. Elena nodded once, listening. I forgot what it felt like to be in a room where no one's trying to get something from me. He looked at her. Until you. Her cheeks flushed. She glanced away, tucking her hair behind her ear. It wasn't some clever plan, she said. I really did think that invitation was meant for me. I was supposed to pick up a donation check at a nearby office. And they gave me the wrong envelope. Eleanor Ward, he said. Nodding. I know. My assistant figured it out. I felt like a joke, she said quietly. The way they looked at me, I wanted the floor to open. They looked at you because they couldn't look through you, he said. They didn't know what to do with someone they couldn't label. Her breath caught slightly. For a moment it was just the two of them, two people in a tiny kitchen with nothing left to prove. Then, ding. Her phone lit up on the counter. She picked it up, her brow furrowed. What is it? Damien asked. She turned the screen toward him. An article, photo of them dancing. Headline, From Party Crasher to Girlfriend? Sources say Damien Cross has taken in the woman from the Halloween scandal. He froze. I never said that to anyone, he said. I didn't either, she replied. They both looked at each other, and both thought the same name, Vivienne. "She's controlling the narrative," Helena said. "She's going to make it look like this was all a stunt." Damien stood, pacing once. "This is what she does. She's been shaping my image for years, quietly, strategically. I never gave her permission, but I never stopped her either. And now, I'm part of the image." "No," he said firmly, "you're not. You're the part they can't fit into a headline. That's why they're scared of you." A silence followed. But something had shifted. "Look," she said gently, "I don't want to be a story. I don't want a spotlight. I just want—" "You," he said. The word slipped out, soft, unplanned. She looked at him, eyes wide, uncertain. He stepped closer. "I mean it." She opened her mouth, and then a knock, sharp, urgent. Both froze. It wasn't the kind of knock you ignore. Elena moved toward the door cautiously, heart suddenly pounding. Damien followed a step behind. She opened it. Standing there was a man in a charcoal gray suit, holding a sealed envelope. "Miss Ward?" he asked politely. "You've been served?" Her breath hitched. She took the envelope, fingers trembling. "What is this?" The man gave a courteous nod. "A formal notice. We advise you, read it soon." He turned and left. Damien stepped forward, eyes scanning the paper in her hands. Then he saw the letterhead. Cross Holdings, Legal Division. And just like that, the warmth of the tea disappeared. Helena stared at the envelope, her name printed neatly across the front, like a label, like a warning. It was thick, official. The kind of paper that never brought anything kind. Damien didn't move. He just watched her. Watched the way her hands trembled slightly as she peeled it open, slow and careful, like the pages might bite. She unfolded the letter, read the first line, then the second. By the third, her face had gone completely still. She handed it to him without a word. He took it, scanned the bolded phrases with growing disbelief. "To protect the integrity and reputation of Cross Holdings and all associated parties, the company issues this formal request for non-disclosure and ceasing of all commentary, media appearances, and social communication relating to the private event held on October 31st at the Cross residence." His jaw locked. "This is Vivienne," he muttered. Elena crossed her arms, voice quiet. "It's your company." "It's not me," he said quickly. "I didn't authorize this. I didn't even know—" He grabbed his phone instantly, dialing his legal director. "Pull the letter," he ordered. "Now! I want every notice retracted and every signature voided." Then, turning back to her, his voice steadier, "This ends tonight. You didn't know your own legal department was threatening me with silence." Damien ran a hand through his hair, stepping back. "She's been acting as my media liaison for years. She knows how to move behind the scenes. I'll handle it. I'll make this go away." Elena folded the letter again, carefully, precisely. "I don't want you to make it go away. I want to know why it happened in the first place." His eyes flickered. Guilt, anger, frustration, all tangled up in the space between them. "She's protecting me," he said bitterly, "or thinks she is, from scandal, from being made to look vulnerable. And I'm the liability." "No," he said, "you're the only part of this that feels real." The words hung there, suspended, but they didn't reach her. Not fully. "Do you want to know the worst part?" Helena said softly, holding the letter up to the light. "It's not even personal. My name isn't mentioned once. I'm just the individual in question." She set it down on the counter beside the now cold tea. "And that," she added, "is how your world sees me." "I don't see you like that," he said. She looked at him finally. "Then show me." Damien stepped closer, one hand reaching out, as if he might take her hand, or maybe even fall to his knees if she asked. But something in her eyes stopped him. It wasn't coldness, it was strength. She was already holding herself upright, already reclaiming her breath. I need space, she said, calm but final. Elena, I've lived my whole life trying not to take up too much room, she said, but this came into my space, my home, my name. She reached up and touched the moon earring gently, like a reminder to herself of everything she still carried. You saw me that night, she said. And then you let them erase me. He flinched. I'm sorry. I believe you, she said, but that doesn't change anything right now. He looked around her apartment, trying to find something. An anchor, a word, a gesture, anything to close the distance. But there was none, only her silence and the door. He turned to leave, but before stepping out, he turned back one last time. I'll fix this, he said. She didn't respond, because in that moment she wasn't waiting to be saved. She was waiting to be respected. That night, Damien sat in the back of his sleek black car, parked outside the Cross Holdings building, staring at his own reflection in the tinted window. He took out his phone, scrolled, stopped at a picture someone had taken from the party, the one where Elena stood awkwardly under the chandelier, caught between laughter and humiliation. She wasn't even looking at the camera, she was looking down. And somehow, even in that moment of shame, she looked dignified. He put the phone down, dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Vivian answered on the second ring. Damien, if this is about the letter, it ends now. A pause. You're upset. I'm done, Vivian, with all of it, with being managed. With you speaking for me. With letters that silence the only person who's been honest with me in a decade. You're making this emotional, she said coolly. I am emotional, he snapped, and I'm not going to apologize for it. He ended the call. For a moment, the silence roared louder than traffic. He leaned his head back, closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he saw something on the passenger seat beside him, the envelope Elena had given him that night. The back still bore her handwriting. You saw me before they did. He picked it up, ran his thumb along the edge, and then he made a decision. The next morning, Elena opened her front door to find a plain brown package resting on her doorstep. No name, no card. Inside, a leather-bound notebook, brand new, and a small note tucked inside the first page. Write your version. I'll read every word. D. Elena held the notebook for a long time before opening it. The leather was soft and cool, still untouched, the kind that asked to be filled slowly, not with gossip, not with edits, but with truth. The note tucked inside was short, so short it nearly felt like a dare. Write your version. I'll read every word. D. She turned to the first blank page and let her hand hover over it. For the first time in days, her mind stopped spinning. The noise faded, the headlines, the whispers, the flash of camera bulbs. All of it dimmed beneath the weight of her pen, and so she began, not with the party, not with the scandal, but with the moment before it all. A woman alone in her apartment on Halloween, just trying to be forgotten for one quiet night. And then the doorbell had rung. 2 days later, Damien stood in the glass atrium of Cross Holdings, not behind his desk, not surrounded by handlers or press officers, but in the open. No mask. Just a man in a charcoal suit holding a copy of the same notebook Elena had returned to him by courier. She hadn't added a cover letter, just page after page, her thoughts, her memories of that night, her doubts, her hopes. And one line, underlined only once. I didn't need saving. I needed someone who wouldn't let them rewrite my story. So Damien had made a decision. He walked to the media wall, called the PR manager, and asked her to send out one email, statement from Damien Cross. No further comment, no legal action, no denials. The story belongs to her. Let her tell it. She deserves to be heard, without needing my permission. He didn't send it for drama. He didn't want a headline, but he knew there would be one. Damien Cross steps back. She deserves to speak for herself. Vivian saw it, of course, before the ink was dry. She stormed into his office, and for the first time in weeks, in tailored black with storm-colored heels. "I told you this would happen," she snapped. "Now they're calling her a modern Cinderella." "They're making you look like a man in love, Damien." He looked up calmly from his seat. "Maybe I am." Vivian blinked. "No, you're not. You don't get to say that. I protected you. You protected the brand," he interrupted. "I asked you to leave Elena alone. You didn't." Vivian's voice lowered dangerously. "You think the board will support this shift? You think they want a romantic storyline in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar real estate merger?" "I think," Damien said slowly, "they've already lost one CEO before me to burnout, and I'm not far behind. And the one thing that's given me peace in the last year is her." Vivian's silence was sharp as glass. "I won't apologize," he added, "and if that costs me your loyalty, then maybe I never had it." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she turned and walked out. No threats, no dramatic goodbye, just the echo of heels in a hallway that suddenly felt too quiet. That evening, Elena stepped out of the library just as the last rays of sunlight dipped behind the roofline. The notebook was no longer in her hands. It was already in his. She hadn't expected a response, but she found one, taped gently to her bicycle seat, folded in half. A simple piece of paper, page 17. "The part where you said you wore the moon earring to feel close to your mother, that broke something in me." She folded the note slowly, pressing it to her chest. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a declaration. It was real. Later that night they met again. Not planned, not perfect. She had stopped by the community gallery where she volunteered, hoping to lose herself in paintbrushes and canvas donations. He was there, standing in the back, hands in his coat pockets. "Did you really read it?" she asked him, voice steady but searching. He nodded. "Twice." She didn't smile, not yet. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. It glinted under the gallery's warm light, the moon earring. She held it out. Then, wordlessly, reached up and clipped it back into her left ear. Only one. He watched her carefully. "Why just the one?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Because the other one's still missing, and I'm not pretending I'm whole yet." A pause, then softly, "But I'm getting there." They stood quietly. The echo of footsteps in the gallery, the only sound between them. He reached out, slow and uncertain, and brushed her hair back behind her shoulder. Not to touch her, not yet, but just to see her face fully. And then, just before the moment could unfold into something more, her phone buzzed. A single message. Her breath caught as she read it. Damien noticed the shift in her face. "What is it?" She looked up, blinking once, then handed him the screen. It was a news alert. "Cross Holdings Board schedules emergency session. Sources say CEO's leadership under review." The boardroom was silent. 10 chairs. 10. 9 occupied. All eyes fixed on one man. Damien Cross sat at the head of the long oak table, suit crisp, mask gone, and for once nothing in his posture looked polished, just real, tired. "You're not on trial," one of the older board members said, "but you must understand how this relationship affects company perception." Another chimed in. "This merger has already taken longer than projected. We need stability." A third leaned forward. "We're not asking you to end it, Damien. We're asking you to manage it." His jaw clenched. "You mean spin it?" "We mean protect the brand." Vivian sat near the window, legs crossed, face unreadable. She hadn't said much, but her silence was a message of its own. Damien stood. "My personal life is not a brand." "Then maybe it shouldn't be public," someone muttered. He looked around the table, these people who had known him for years, who had watched him climb from nothing, who had once admired him for doing things his way. Now they wanted silence, conformity, masks. He walked out without another word. Elena stood inside her father's old workshop, the scent of cedar and oil staining the air like a memory. She hadn't been back in years, not since he passed. The tools still hung in neat rows. His handwriting still marked the wooden shelves. Flathead, Phillips, metric. Every corner of the room whispered, "You came from something strong, steady." Enough. She sat at the small bench by the window, the late afternoon sun catching the edge of a small silver box. Inside were a few old things she'd kept, her mother's brooch, a worn pocket knife, memories that still carried weight. She closed the lid slowly, feeling both heavier and lighter at the same time. A knock at the door broke the silence. She turned, expecting Damien, but it wasn't him. It was a woman she'd never seen before, mid-50s. Elegant, unassuming. She held no phone, no pen, no camera, just presence. "Elena Ward?" the woman asked. "Yes?" "I represent the Legal Oversight Council for Cross Holdings. Off the record." Elena straightened. "You're here because of Damien. I'm here because of the choice you represent." Elena didn't speak. The woman stepped forward, voice calm and low. "There's still time to shift the narrative. You're not under fire yet, but Mr. Cross is facing internal pressure. A pause in public involvement would be beneficial." Elena blinked. "You want me to disappear?" "I'm asking you to give him room to protect what he's built." "He doesn't want me to disappear?" "No," the woman said. "But sometimes love and legacy can't live in the same house." Elena looked down at the earring in her hand. "It's not about sacrifice," the woman added gently. "It's about choosing which story you want to be part of." She turned and walked out without waiting for an answer. That night, Damien found her still in the workshop. The lights were off, but she hadn't moved. He stepped inside quietly. "I heard you came here," he said. She didn't turn. "They want you to let me go," he added. "I know. I won't ask you to. I know that too." A long silence passed between them, filled with everything they hadn't said. Then, slowly, she turned to him and held up the second earring. "I found it." He stepped closer, staring down at the tiny silver moon resting in her palm. "You said you weren't whole yet," he whispered. "I'm still not," she replied. "But I'm closer now than I've ever been." He sat beside her on the bench, their shoulders not quite touching. Elena glanced sideways. "If I left, would it help you keep everything you've built?" He didn't answer right away. Because he wasn't sure. "I don't want the version of me they want," he finally said. "Not anymore." "But you might still have to live with him," she said. Their eyes met. It wasn't pity or apology between them. It was recognition. Elena reached up and clipped the second earring in place. The moon was whole again. But her heart still trembled. Damien reached out, just barely, and touched her hand. "I don't know what happens next," he said. She smiled, soft, sad. "Me neither." He leaned in, slowly, as if asking without asking, until their foreheads touched. The warmth of him, the smell of his cologne, his breath. Their lips were this close. And then, a knock. Again, like the world couldn't let them have anything simple. She pulled back. He exhaled. They both turned toward the door. And in that moment, standing in the soft light of the workshop, Damien asked a question he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. "Elena, if this costs me everything, would you still want me?" She didn't answer, not with words, but her silence held too much truth to ignore. The next morning, Damien stood in front of the full-length mirror in his penthouse suite, tie in hand, shirt crisp, expression unreadable. He didn't move. Behind him, the morning news played softly on a wall-mounted screen. Cross Holdings Board is expected to vote this afternoon on whether to maintain current leadership after a wave of public scrutiny involving CEO Damien Cross and his unconfirmed relationship with a woman identified as Elena Ward. He turned off the screen. The silence was louder than the headlines. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. You can still fix this. Walk in alone. Say nothing. He stared at the message for a full minute, then deleted it. Elena's kitchen smelled like toasted bread and garlic butter. She moved slowly, her sleeves rolled up, bare feet quiet against the tile. The sun streamed through the window in long golden lines. Her radio hummed in the background. Soft jazz, imperfect and comforting. On the stove, a pot of vegetable soup simmered. It wasn't for anyone else. It was for her, after days of being watched, whispered about. And written into someone else's story, she needed to feed herself. Body, soul, spirit. A single bowl, a slice of toasted sourdough, real butter, no cameras, no negotiations, just something warm in her hands. She sat at the table and took her first bite. The soup was simple, honest, good, and in that moment, she felt something settle inside her. Not closure, but choice. She didn't know what Damien would do, and she didn't need to wait for his answer to know hers. She loved him, yes, but she would not disappear for him. She folded a note she'd written the night before, just 6 lines, one for each time she nearly gave up her voice for someone else. She slipped it inside an envelope and addressed it simply, for him, if he chooses to stay real. Then she finished her soup, slowly, with reverence. The boardroom was colder this time, tense. Vivian was already seated when Damien walked in, alone, no lawyer, no entourage, just himself. Some of the board looked relieved. Others, wary. Vivian's eyes met his. Her meaning was clear. Don't ruin this. He stood. I've reviewed your concerns, he said calmly, and I understand the stakes, but I won't allow personal relationships to be treated like liabilities. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Cross, we understand this is personal, but the optics are not my leadership. He took a breath. I've built this company on trust, clarity, and negotiation, but I will not negotiate someone else's dignity. Vivian opened her mouth, but Damien raised a hand. I'm not stepping down, but I am changing the way we lead. No more media spin, no more decisions behind backs. If I can't lead with transparency, I won't lead at all. The silence that followed was tight, uncertain, but clean. It wasn't a scandal anymore, it was a stand. That evening, Elena stepped out into the cool air, her moon earrings gently catching the breeze. She didn't know where she was going exactly, only that she needed space to breathe under the open sky. She walked past a small park near her apartment, where children had once carved pumpkins into crooked faces. The lanterns were gone now, but traces of candle wax still lingered on the stones. She paused, sat on the edge of the fountain, let herself be still, and then she heard footsteps, not hurried, not dramatic, just familiar. She turned. Damien stood a few feet away, hair slightly wind-tossed, coat unbuttoned. No driver, no security, just him. You came, she said. I did. She waited. I didn't come to make promises, he added. I came to ask you something. She nodded. He stepped closer, carefully. I don't know what this life looks like, the one where we're in it together without hiding, without someone rewriting the ending every time we get close. He exhaled. But I'm done asking you to be less. She blinked, eyes glistening. I read your note, he added. All 6 lines. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded napkin, old, stained from the day he first brought her apple cider. She handed it to him, and then, her voice low and sure, Then I only have one question. He met her gaze. What's worth more to you, the name you built, or the life you want to live beneath it? He didn't answer. He slipped a small box from his coat pocket. I asked the staff to check the ballroom after that night, he said quietly. They found this under the edge of the carpet. Inside was the second moon earring. He just stepped forward and took her hand, and for the first time, he didn't need to speak. Because her fingers tightened around his, not for protection, not for show, but for choosing. The gallery buzzed quietly, a soft, reverent hum as visitors moved through the small space, pausing at canvases filled with moonlight, brushstrokes, and stories. Elena stood in a simple dress behind the welcome table, watching it all unfold. This wasn't about her, not this time. The exhibit was titled Unmasked Portraits of Stillness. It featured work from community artists, students, and women who had once hidden more than just their talent. She had helped organize it before Halloween ever happened. Now it felt like the only place she wanted to be. A woman approached her, a older, well-dressed, hesitant. "You're Elena Ward?" Elena nodded gently. The woman smiled, eyes soft. "I just wanted to say, I read your letter, the one you published on your blog. It was beautiful, quiet, but brave." Elena felt her throat tighten. She hadn't expected strangers to care. "Thank you," she said. "You said something in it that you didn't want to be a headline, that you just wanted your story to belong to you." The woman nodded. "I understood that more than I can say." They exchanged no more words, but as the woman walked away, Elena exhaled. This was enough. Being seen without having to perform, heard without raising her voice, respected without having to be invited. Damien arrived later, not with cameras, not with speeches, but with coffee. 2 cups. "Decaf," he said, placing one beside her. "I remembered." She smiled. "I'm impressed." "Don't be. It took me 6 failed guesses and a very grumpy barista." They stood side by side near the far end of the gallery, beneath a painting of a sky lit only by the moon. "It looks like your earrings," he said, nodding to the canvas. Elena reached up and touched one of them, the left one, the one she'd once thought was lost. "They were my mother's," she said again, "but now they're mine." He looked at her, then leaned close enough for only her to hear. "I'm not asking you to come into my world," he said. "I'm asking if I can come into yours." She looked up at him, not dazzled, not uncertain, but steady. "That depends," she said. "On what?" "Can you cook?" He laughed, a real warm laugh, and it loosened something in both of them. Later that night, they stood barefoot in her kitchen, the moon pouring through the open window, and the smell of garlic and lemon filling the space. He chopped slowly, carefully, not because he didn't know how, but because he wanted to learn her way. She stirred the pot. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The silence was a new kind now, soft, not strained, safe. They ate at the table by the window, just pasta, with sautéed spinach and a hint of red pepper, and water, no wine. No need to soften anything. Halfway through the meal, Damien set down his fork and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small box. Elena stared at it, heart catching. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "It's not a ring." She raised an eyebrow. "Good. That would be a terrible way to end pasta." He smiled, then opened the box. Inside, a pendant, small, silver, a crescent moon, with a tiny engraving on the back. "She stays," Elena blinked. "I had it made," he said softly, "because the first real decision I made that night was keeping you there." She ran her finger over the words. The engraving was barely visible, but it didn't need to be loud to matter. "I don't want to be the reason you leave everything behind," she said. "I don't see it as leaving," he replied. "I see it as returning to something real." She closed the box gently. "I'm not ready to move into your world, Damien." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" He looked at her, steady, open. "I'm asking if I can stay in yours, as long as you'll have me." Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. She stood. He followed. When she opened it, no one was there, just a small envelope on the welcome mat. She picked it up, opened it slowly. It wasn't a threat, not a demand, just a simple card. From Vivian. 1 sentence. "Don't be surprised if the board comes looking for you next." Elena tilted her head. "What does it mean?" Damien asked. She handed it to him, and for the first time, he smiled. "She's not warning you," he said. "She's conceding. She thinks they'll want me?" He looked at her with something between wonder and certainty. "No," he said. "She knows they already do." A few weeks later, after the noise had settled, Elena found herself back at Cross Holdings, this time as part of a 3-month pilot program in media ethics and community trust. The conference room wasn't the place Elena expected to see again, and certainly not like this. She stood before the same board that once questioned Damien's choices. Only now, they were looking at her, not with judgment, not with pity, with consideration, respect. "I'll be direct," said one of the senior partners. "We've followed your work, not just the letter, not just the coverage, the programs you've run, the gallery, the community grants." Another board member nodded. "You understand people, space, timing, reputation built through connection, and we could use that here." Elena folded her hands in front of her. "You want me as what?" "Advisor," the woman said. "Media ethics, community trust, reputation restoration. It's a new division. You'd help shape it. And if I say no," they didn't flinch. "Then we thank you for your time and wish you well." No pressure, just choice. She glanced at Damien across the room. He stood near the window, arms folded, silent, present. He hadn't put her up to this. He hadn't whispered anything in their ears. He was just letting her decide. Later, as they walked side by side down the front steps of Cross Holdings, she let out a long breath. That was surreal. "You handled it like you belonged there," he said. "I didn't belong anywhere for a long time," she replied. "Then you opened a door, and I walked into a place that wasn't mine." He paused. "You think I opened the door?" She looked at him, moonlight tracing the edge of her jaw. "You didn't open it, Damien. I walked in by accident, but you didn't close it on me. That's what changed everything." They walked in silence a few more steps. Then she added, "But this next one? If I take it, I want it to be mine from the beginning." "Then take it," he said, "or don't. I'll be standing next to you either way." They returned to her apartment later. Not as guests, not as strangers, but as two people who no longer needed the lights, dimmed, to feel safe. He helped her water the plants. She handed him a mug of tea. There was no rush, no staged kiss, no speech, but there was warmth and timing and presence. She reached for her earrings, slowly unclipping the moons and setting them in a small dish by the sink. He watched her. "You're not wearing them?" "I wore them when I needed to feel protected," she said. "Tonight, I don't." That silence said more than any vow ever could. A week later, Elena returned to her father's old workshop, not to hide, to begin again. She placed a clean sheet of paper on the bench and wrote a name on the top. Warden Cross, Human-Centered Design, Plusio Strategy. It wasn't a company yet, but it would be. Something between legacy and love. Built not from rescue, but respect. That evening she and Damien walked through the park where pumpkins had once glowed. Now the path was lit only by the moon. Soft, quiet, full. She took his hand. "This doesn't feel like a fairy tale," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "No?" She shook her head. "Fairy tales end when the dress comes off and the world returns. This feels like real life." He smiled. "Then let's build it," he said. They stopped near the old stone fountain. A single candle flickered there, left over from someone else's memory, not theirs. Still it glowed. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a silver chain, not a box. At the end, the same silver pendant he had given her, the one engraved with "She Stays." He fastened it gently around her neck again, where it had always belonged. "You'll have the moon with you." She touched the pendant, tears rising without falling. And in the silence that followed, still, gentle, sure, she kissed him. Not to prove anything, not to end the story, just because it was time. 2 years later, the chapel was quiet. Not grand, not lavish, just quiet. Sunlight filtered through old glass windows, casting golden light on the wooden pews. Wildflowers sat in simple vases, their colors soft, chosen by hand. And at the altar stood a man who had once believed he had to control everything to protect himself. Now he waited with empty hands and an open heart. Damien Cross looked nothing like the headlines. No suit, no velvet mask, just a tailored navy jacket, a clean white shirt, and eyes that had finally learned how to be still. And then the doors opened. No music, no announcement, just Elena. Hair softly pinned, the moon earring gently glinting on one side. Her mother's quiet legacy tucked into her smile. Her dress was simple, no diamonds, no veil, just silk and calm, and the look of a woman who wasn't entering to be rescued, but to stand beside someone she had chosen. He didn't cry. But when she reached him, and he saw the pendant he'd once given her, the silver moon with "She Stays" engraved on the back, resting over her heart, he almost did. They didn't exchange elaborate vows, only this: "I walked into your world by accident," she said, "but I choose you now, on purpose, without fear, without condition. I let you in once," he said, "and I never want to close that door again." And just like that, and they were husband and wife. Later that evening, the house was quiet, tucked just outside the city. A garden in the back, a porch swing in the front, 2 cats, one his, one hers, sharing a pillow. They didn't throw a party, they didn't post online. Instead, they sat at the small table by the window, 2 bowls of warm soup, a loaf of fresh bread between them, and no masks left to wear. He reached across the table and touched her hand. "Still wearing the moon?" he asked. She nodded. "It reminds me." "Of what?" She looked at him, steady, glowing. "That I didn't walk into the wrong place that night. I walked into the right one, just not the one I expected. And in that quiet, with no audience, no headlines, and no pressure." They leaned in and kissed. Not because it was the perfect moment, but because it was theirs. Some love stories don't need grand gestures. They just need 2 people who choose each other, not once, but always. The end. And you? If someone truly saw you, not as a mistake, not as a risk, but as someone worth choosing, would you walk away to protect your pride, or would you stay and build something real? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your heart. Like this story if it stayed with you, and rate it from 0 to 10. How much did this story mean to you? Until the next one, stay true, stay kind, and never doubt the beauty of a quiet, real beginning. See you in the next story.